Welcome back to We the People University. My name is Abaye Israel, former police officer, former sheriff deputy. Gonna ask that you guys bear with me today. I will not be making an on-screen appearance due to being under the weather. Pretty sure you guys wouldn't want to see me looking all yucky anyways. But I do have a great video for you today, brought to you from a YouTube channel by the name of Mr. Porter. If you have not subscribed to his channel, please make sure you go and do so. If you're familiar with Mr. Porter, you know, as always, he's always educating law enforcement. And in this video, we're going to see a cop who clearly states that Mr. Porter has the right to free speech, but he still tries to identify him and then tells him it's a lawful command. Well, if it's a lawful command, but yet you say that he has the right to free speech, then why does he have to identify? And as we're going to hear, the state of Maryland is not a stop and ID state, but later in the video, we're going to get into the difference between a stop and ID state and a state that's not a stop and ID state. I know a lot of people have written me and asked me that question. Hey, what's the difference? I'm going to break it down for you today. Make sure you stay tuned. Let's jump into this video.
Nope. Keeps them honest.
You might be chill, man. Don't hold the camera like that. Come on, man. I hate people who do that stuff.
Nope.
How we doing, officer? Thanks, sir. Sorry if I was standing in the road a bit.
So what's the deal with the sign?
I don't like Larry Hogan, in case you couldn't tell.
I couldn't tell at all.
I'm a little bit reserved with my opinions, a little bit on the guarded side.
On the party. Man, I got an extra. I deserve my heart. We're getting all the love out here, sir.
It's freedom of speech.
Go!
But can I have your ID just so I can...
What reasonable, articulable suspicion do you have that I committed a crime that I should require to identify myself in the state of Maryland? It's not a stop and ID state. I haven't committed a crime.
I'm a uniformed officer asking for your ID.
This is not a stop and ID state. You have no RAS that I committed a crime. I will not ID because I don't legally have to.
You do look at
No, I don't. It's not a stop and ID state. You don't suspect me of committing a crime. You have no probable cause to believe I committed a crime. So you can't ask me to identify unless you have RAS that a crime occurred, is occurring, or is going to occur.
I believe he is right, sir.
No, I'm telling you, it's not a stop and ID state, and I've gone through this. I've been doing this every day for 6 weeks. Do you know how many different officers and state's attorneys, including your state's attorney, I've already dealt with?
what state's attorney?
So what is a stop and ID state? If you look at this map, all states that are in red are stop and ID states. All states that are in red are stop and ID states. If you're a state in the green area, you are not a stop and ID state. We see Missouri, which is in yellow. It does have a stop and ID statute, but it only applies to Kansas City. So if you live in a stop and ID state, what does that mean for you? How does that affect you when law enforcement requests or demands that you ID yourself? Before a police officer can properly stop a person and demand ID, the officer must have reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime has occurred or is about to occur. This means the officer must be able to state facts and circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime occurred or will soon. Okay, we know that for a fact. No matter what state you live in, stop and ID state or a state that does not have stop and ID, in order for an officer to demand ID, we already know that he must or she must suspect you of committing a crime or about to commit a crime. But what if you do live in a stop and ID state and the officer does suspect you of committing a crime? Then what does that mean? It means you must ID. But here's the thing. What does the word ID or identify really mean? It means different things depending on what state you're in. Identifying information varies depending on the state, but typically includes name, address, and explanation of the person's actions. In some cases, it also includes the person's intended destination and the person's date of birth. Now, if you're stating, well, I'm going to plead the fifth, well, if you're in a stop and ID state and you are suspected of committing a crime, then you must give this information when requested. But let's say you live in a state that's not a stop and ID state and you are suspected of committing a crime. Then what? At that point, you must identify with what? A driver's license or state ID or your name. All of the other information as far as the explanation of your actions or your intended destination, your date of birth is not required. Some states do not have stop and identify statutes. Related statutes in these states vary, and some require a person to respond to the officer's request for identification, and some do not. However, if a person does voluntarily elect to answer, providing false information is usually a crime. In states that have stop and identify laws, the prosecutor has to prove two things in order to get a conviction. One, the law enforcement officer lawfully stopped the defendant, and two, the defendant refused to identify him or herself. So let's make this simple. No matter what state you live in, a stop and ID state or a state that's not a stop and ID state, if an officer has reasonable articulable suspicion that you are committing or about to commit a crime, you must ID. But the state that is a stop and ID state, the word ID means more than what we normally think it would mean. In these particular states, identifying oneself is giving your name, your address, and the explanation of your actions, even your intended destination. If you're not in a stop and ID state, you can give your name or your state ID, and that is it.
Your state's attorney for your county, Worcester County, Worcester, whatever. I don't know, but look me up. I'm on the news. The lady that I called and the lady that made the press release through the Ocean City Police Department last week that's been all over the news that says I am protected free speech and you can't do anything about it.
Oh, I'm not doing anything about it.
It was in the paper. Remember the guy with the sign on the boardwalk? That's me.
I wasn't, I've been on vacation for 2 weeks.
You can call, well, this was 2 weeks ago. You can call Officer Matthew Foreskin, Corporal Matthew Foreskin, Ocean City PD. Ask who the guy with the sign is. He'll tell you in 2 seconds. He's working tonight.
So you don't want to give me your ID?
I didn't commit a crime. Otherwise, I would gladly ID if I committed a crime, but I didn't commit a crime.
We're just having a conversation.
Right. This is a consensual encounter. This is not a detainment. I'm not being detained, nor am I being arrested.
No, I don't plan on arresting you. You're doing free speech.
Right. So why would I ID to free speech? It's a constitutionally protected right to all American citizens.
I'm just here talking.
You can call me good citizen. Proud to be an American. You can call me Lee Greenwood. You can call me anything except for late to dinner.
Too. He just doesn't want to have to give you his ID.
I respect the Constitution.
So you just don't like Larry Hogan and...
I can't stand Larry Hogan's lockdown BS, what he's done to this state. I don't like anything.
My family lose a lot of business.
He's ruined everyone's lives that I know. Why would I like the guy? Seriously.
Come on, man. We're missing the fun out here. Let's go!
Hey, you too, officer.
And that's exactly how it's done. Always know your rights. We've seen video after video after video proving that if you know your rights, you will come out on top. That's not to say every now and then you won't bump into a super tyrant who then goes on to try and violate your rights. But if he does, then you take him into the courtroom and you beat him there. Never let them trample over your rights, the rights that the Constitution has given each and every one of us. Make sure you know your rights. Download my free ebook. It's going to help you to learn your rights, and also register for my online video course properly titled Surviving the Police. It's going to teach you everything that you need to know to make sure your rights are never violated. With that being said, guys, I'm going to drink some Theraflu. Make sure you know your rights. We the People University, signing off.